Welcome to the Q-MindBody podcast. My name is Darren Main, and in this podcast, we talk about all things having to do with gay men's wellness, health, spirituality, relationships, you name it. If it makes your life better, we talk about it. In this podcast, we're going to talk about 3 ways you can get more intimacy out of your gay relationships, which is something I know I have struggled with, and I think a lot of gay men have. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation. My guest today is Andreas Anthony. His website is andreasembodiment.com. And of course, I will put links to that in the show notes. He is a coach that works with embodiment issues of all different kinds. I'll let him tell you more about it. And gay men's sexuality and intimacy. He's also a yoga teacher and teaches naked yoga, tantric yoga. We have that in common. We'll get to that a little bit later. So reach out to him if you would like to connect with him, learn more about his work. Also, you can check out the Gay Wellness website. It is a directory of healers, just like Andreas and I, doing all sorts of great work with gay men all over the world. So you can find a healer in your neighborhood or somewhere, I don't know, say in Australia. And I will, we will be monitoring the questions and the comments associated with this podcast. If you have any thoughts or questions or want to share your perspective, please drop them in the comments or share the episode so that others can find it as well, and we will connect with you that way. Finally, we have an online Facebook group if you'd like to join to connect with other mindfulness and wellness-minded gay men around the world. So with that, all that out of the way, Andreas, how are you?
Hey, Darren. I'm so well, and thank you for welcoming me onto your podcast. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. You know, I always find it trippy. I can't get my head around it, but you're in Sydney, Australia, and I'm in Berkeley, California, and you're already into tomorrow, my tomorrow, and I'm like wondering, did something awful happen? I feel like it's like a Star Trek time machine here. I'm
Yes,
talking to
coming
the
to you from the
future.
future. Yeah, I'm actually coming from Canberra. So a lot of people don't know Canberra, but Canberra is the capital city of Australia. Same time zone as Sydney,
Oh,
though.
you see, I didn't know that. I thought it was Sydney. Like,
Most people do.
I'm learning geography here. And you all just hang out at the Opera House in Sydney, right? That's the only thing there.
Sydney
The
Harbour
Opera House
Bridge.
and kangaroos, you know.
Absolutely.
Um, so before we dive in, I'm really excited to chat with you because our topic is about gay men and intimacy. And I get this question all the time. Gay men are pretty good at hooking up. We have apps that help us. We have all ways that we can do whatever we want in terms of sexuality and in the bedroom. But for many of us, intimacy and more connected experiences that may or may not include sex tend to be elusive. And so you've got 3 ways you're going to share with us. But before we get to that, a little bit more about you for people who might not be familiar with your work. What exactly is it that you do, and how do you help gay men like me?
Yeah, so I'm a practicing tantric practitioner here in Australia. So for those of you that don't know what Tantra is, you can think of it as a esoteric practice, a spiritual practice that is about really connecting into the deepest and fullest part of you by going deeply into your body. So you can think of it as a spiritual embodiment. It's all about working with your breath. It's about working with your sexuality in many cases, so that you can become more full, so that you can connect to a deeper aspect of you and live a more fulfilling life. That's a very simplified version of, um, but that is a predominant thing that I carry here in Australia. I mean, I wear very many hats. I'm also a psychic practitioner. I run and operate Nude Yoga Canberra for men, which is probably how we connected in the first place, Darren. So yeah, lots of different hats here as a big spiritual gay guy.
Well, we did connect around the nude yoga, and it's interesting because I'm not currently teaching it, but a donation-based naked men's yoga class probably 15, 20 years ago. I don't know. It was a long time ago. And I thought no one would show up. It'd be like me and one other naked guy there.
Mm.
And gay men and some straight men too were just drawn to this. And it wasn't a non-sexual thing. We had a strictly no cruising rule. Like, you go hook up somewhere else, but not here. This is space for you to be in your body and drop the shame. Um, and it was so powerful to see that, and also and I'd like for you to speak to this. Interesting how we can, as gay men, be so chasing after bodily pleasure and yet so disembodied, so dissociated from our body at the same time. Almost more dissociated than our straight counterparts, who might not have as full a sex life as some of the gay men we we know, but to be disembodied, to be dissociated from it in some way. So I'm wondering if you could reflect on just that, just top line thing, like the difference between chasing pleasure for pleasure's sake and doing it while being disconnected from it, and how that differs from being embodied and being more intimate. I don't know where that question
Yeah,
went, but
that's
have fun with
I
it.
love that question. Yeah, it's quite a deep question, and I think it speaks to really a core, uh, perhaps a core wound within many LGBTQ plus people, and of course straight people as well. But as you said, that gay people often struggle with this, like, bodily, I would say, superficial layer of pleasure, where we're chasing pleasure, we're trying to fill our cups. And I don't want to go into too much spiritual jargon here, but in the center of our body is our worthiness center. It's called the solar plexus chakra. So often when we are chasing these experiences, when we feel like there's never enough, when we feel like we always need more, when we feel like the latest, most tantalizing, titillating, taboo experience wasn't enough, that is because we're trying to fill a well that has the bottom completely, like, blown out of it. It's like, if you imagine a well, we're trying to fill the well, but at the same time, the well isn't carrying any water. So that's like our inner reserves of worthiness. That's our inner reserves of, like, our cup is filled. The reasons for that are many, right? We've grown up with perhaps more sexual shame. We've been told as we've grown up that we are wrong, that what we are doing is wrong. We may have internalized homophobia. May have religious or cultural pressures or narratives around us. We may even be doing it all behind closed doors in secret, and nobody even knows that we're gay. So there's all of these issues which can, yeah, essentially erode the base of our well. Our cup is not being filled, which makes us chase. Energetically, if we're speaking to the energetics, that's what happens. And I've been there. When I was younger, when I was shameful, when I was a young, maybe like in my early 20s, I was addicted to online camming. I was really scared of any intimacy, like true intimacy with another person, because that meant, like, being vulnerable and, like, communicating properly with somebody. And I felt deeply unfulfilled. So it didn't matter how many times I was having an erotic experience. I It kind of just scratched the itch, but it never felt like it was actually wrapping me with something that felt nourishing, and that felt like it was bringing me up and expanding my experience and connecting me to other men. Yeah, so what's the reverse of that is you fill up your own cup, which is a bit of a cliche, but you fill up your inner body. You do the things like tantra or therapy or looking after yourself to make sure the bottom of your cup or well is, like, actually going to support putting all of these things like tantra or spiritual coaching or nude yoga into it. so that when you're no longer desperately seeking something, you're actually like moving forward into the world with that inner worthiness shining out, which then attracts the right experiences.
Yeah. Well, when you use the word cliche, I want to pull on that thread a little bit, because I think it's a great segue into the three things that you wanted to bring up. Most people listening to or watching this podcast go, "Yeah, I agree," and then the reality is that we don't really know how. So we agree that, yeah, when you expend all this energy or you're just constantly seeking to fill that void, that it doesn't, you have to fill your own cup first. But if we don't know how, if no one ever taught us how, it's a nice sentiment. It's like, world peace is what we want. Well, yay. Yes, that's true. But how do we get to that point? And I'm wondering if you could maybe dive into maybe you had three things in mind. The first of the three, and maybe piggyback on that observation as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's a few things that I would love to speak to with that. And, it's actually, it reminds me of so there's a beautiful man that I have worked with one-on-one and in a group container I ran online last year. And he's actually in San Francisco. He's a poet, a beautiful poet in San Francisco. And he really described the feeling of just being lonely and horny, and he was like, often what it is it's lonely and horny. And those two come together to create this like beast of an impulse, right? And I think lonely plus horny kind of sums up what that experience may really be, especially the loneliness piece, because that's that kind of that sense of it's not fully being met, right? We're not fully being met by these superficial experiences. But before I get into those three tips or those three things that you can do, I think it's really important to understand that there is a difference between hot, intimate, or hot connection, hot sexual connection, and deeply intimate connection. And we often think that if it's hot sex, that it's going to be intimate sex, and that's just not true. Then one does not equal the other. So I think it's really important before I go anywhere is to understand that just because you're having a sexual encounter, that doesn't mean that intimacy is going to be present, because intimacy has to be built. And similarly, if you're going into an intimate encounter, sex does not need to be present either. Often intimacy is actually built outside of the bedroom, outside of erotic context. And then that creates the juice to build something that is really hot, really sexy, and also intimate. It gets to be both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So,
Yeah, good point.
yeah, I think a lot of us are subconsciously, and I had to check myself for this too, is we think that if it's hot, sexy sex, then it's got to be with a stranger or it's got to be a hookup, because the only other option to that is a marriage. And the only other option to that is like having, you know, having sex with the same person all the time, or something that gets really boring and dies over time, or like, this idea that it's one or the other. And it's not one or the other. It just means we have to be a little bit more mindful about how we build our connections with other people. And, there's lots of different little ingredients that go into these three tips that I have for the listeners today. But to keep it as simple as possible, those four ingredients are honest communication with each other, mutual respect and understanding, a sense of trust with the other person, and vulnerability. And I think like if you have at least one of those in the intimate encounter that you're going into with somebody, then there's going to be a something there. If you have all four, wow, that's going to be really powerful. But I think that often we go into these erotic encounters with none. No honest communication.
Well, I think sometimes people go into marriages with none of those, or those marriages evolve into. In other words, sometimes, like, I think for a lot of gay men in hookup culture, that is certainly true. But I think even just because you're in a long-term relationship doesn't mean you have those three things or any of them.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
absolutely.
Go on.
No, that's such an interesting experience to. I mean, I'm a 31-year-old never married man, right? So that's my frame
Oh,
of
I think after this
understanding.
podcast, you're going to get lots of proposals. I can see the emails flooding your inbox.
Come to Australia.
Well,
Absolutely.
after the last election here in the States, you might get some takers.
Yeah, that's right. Come here. Yeah,
Anyway,
so
I digress. Go on with what you were saying.
yeah, I think that, just to sum up those four ingredients, it was honest communication, mutual respect and understanding, a sense of trust and vulnerability. Like, ask yourself, do you have any of that in your relationships or in the sexual encounters you're going into? And if you don't, that there's no surprise then that you don't feel fulfilled because you're only scratching the surface of sexuality, the superficial pleasure like area of the body. You're not moving into the deeper aspects of your emotions, your mental
Yeah,
state, your spirit, all of these things where fulfillment comes from. You have to go deeper. And that's where Tantra is really helpful, I think.
yeah.
So I could keep going, but yeah, I just want to check in. I could go into the first tip if you would like, or I'm curious
Go
what's coming
for
up
it.
there. I mean, the good thing is that the first tip actually just comes out of those four ingredients. And the first tip is to communicate what you're truly feeling and what you truly desire. And that's sometimes a bit of an eye roll because we go, well, communication is key, and everyone knows that communication is the most important thing in a relationship, or whether that's long term or whether that's fleeting.
Yeah.
But often what we get is an experience, like if we, let's just take Grindr or something like that, or Scruff.
Yeah.
Or what's the American thing that's popping off now? Sniffies or something? I don't even know what that is, but I've heard a lot about it from my clients.
Oh.
We won't go down
Yeah.
that road.
Um, let's just say it's not Match.com. It's
Right.
it's it's not for people looking for a date.
Right. Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
I think it brings up a good point, though, is that if all you are seeking is a hookup, be clear about that, honor that. But don't go into a hookup seeking more than a hookup because you are going to probably be let down, right? If
Yeah.
you're going into, hey, the arrangement from our communication is that this is going to be a one time, no strings attached, sexy thing, and then probably never talk to each other again, that's great if you know that that's what you're doing. But if you're creating that setup because your communication is creating that setup with another man on Grindr or whoever it is, then let's not kid ourselves into thinking that there's going to become more out of that as the default experience. And let's not set up that
Yeah.
expectation. So that's where the
I
communication needs to be clear.
I agree with you, but I want to just push on that a little bit because I think a lot of times, if somebody take sex out for a minute and you take food, like why are you eating junk food right now? Most people say because I'm hungry and I want a snack and I deserve a treat. But if you peel that back a little bit and you look underneath, it's like I'm feeling lonely right now. I'm feeling, afraid. I'm nervous. I'm whatever. There's some negative emotion under the surface that I don't really want to feel right now, and so I'll just go eat a Twinkie instead. And I think most people, I don't even think know that when they're going on Grindr or Sniffies or whatever, that they are looking for something deeper and ultimately going to be disappointed that they don't find it, but they think what they want is the quickie.
Mm,
Right? On the surface, it appears that that's what they want, but deeper, maybe they want something different. And that's where the disappointment is coming from.
mm. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
how do you advise people, like, even do the self work or the self inquiry to say why do I really want to do this? Why do I really want to hook up with that guy behind the dumpster or whatever? Which sounds hot, by the
Absolutely.
way. I'm just kidding.
Right? It does. And that actually touches on the second tip. So like we're vibing here because the second tip is to slow it down. And yes, you're right. If you do things like go and speak with a therapist or a coach or work on yourself or do yoga or do meditation so that you can actually become skilled in understanding your inner world, your inner emotions and that landscape so that you can actually know what your true desires and motivations are. But the simplest and easiest way to start to access that is to just slow down, which is counter to the pace of the apps, because that is about now, how close are you to me, and how quickly ready, how accessible are you to me? So even before opening the app or checking that reply or whatever it is, I would highly encourage you to just take a sec and be like, what is driving this action? What do I want to achieve out of this? Or what am I seeking from this interaction? Because I mean, I spent so, like, it's insane, Darren. Like, I spent so long trying to chase love in fleeting hookup experiences, and I'm not saying that you can't hook up with somebody and then it blossoms into something else. But I spent a really long time chasing sex because I was trying to actually fulfill something deeper. And I had to clock onto myself, oh, hey, I'm actually trying to use like sexual interaction here as some sort of like band-aid tool. And by slowing it down, which has looked like developing like a really robust tantric yogic practice, right? That has really helped me to understand what those desires are. And for me personally, I do want love. I am a lovey-dovey person. I do want all of those things. Like, give me the white picket fence, baby. So by honoring that and owning that, I can be more clear in the communication, which is that first tip. Be more clear in what I'm seeking. Like, if you go onto my Grindr profile, if anyone has the paid version and they want to zoom over and come over to Canberra and check out my Grindr profile, like it says, I'm here to make connections. I'm here to make connections and get to know somebody. Like, it actually says that. It doesn't say I'm seeking a dom top, because for me, that's the most important piece, is seeking the connection. And does that mean I get like less people coming my way? Probably.
I'm curious, what is the average reaction? I mean, I know everybody's different, but do people who message you say, wow, what a refreshingly wonderful profile, a guy who actually wants intimacy and connection and something more than a hookup? Or are they like, yeah, that's freakish kink that even I can't do, that like knowing each other and talking to each other, you freak, go get some help.
Connection is such a freaky kink. So dirty,
Yeah,
Darren.
we can like rim each other, but we're not going to get names.
Absolutely.
So I'm
So
wondering, like, how do people react to your profile? Because I'm on Scruff and I've done a similar thing. Like, this is who I am. This is what I want. You know what I mean? And some guys are just delete and block me, I suppose. And I mean, some do because I'm old, but but a shocking number of guys message me and say, thank you so much for writing that. I guess the ones who read it.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it scares off the wrong people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, is it better for me to receive 10 people into my inbox, 8 of which don't want to actually match what I'm seeking? Or is it better to receive 2 people who are actually going to fulfill what I'm seeking, who are actually going to match my vibration, who are going to actually be calibrated to match me?
Yeah.
That's an alignment, right? That's where real connection comes from, that alignment. So in my experience, yes, I have noticed that it has potentially scared away the wrong people. However, it
You
wasn't a long
dodged a
time,
bullet.
but
You didn't
well,
waste a lot
yeah.
of time.
I met my ex on Grindr, of all things, and you know what? His exact words were, I mean, yeah, we're not together anymore, but his exact words were, "Wow, wow! Like, this is exactly what I've been hoping for with
Yeah.
my little bio."
Well, why is he your ex? No, you don't have
We
to
just
answer
didn't work
that.
out, you
You don't
know.
have to answer that.
He was a very sexy man. He is a very sexy man,
Yeah,
but we were just not quite it.
yeah. I'm just teasing. Was there a third one in there somewhere? I know we've sort of blended
A
one and two
third
together
guy,
a little bit. Was there a third thing in there? As I quickly change the subject and before I get us in trouble.
a third tip. Yeah, there is a third
Yeah.
tip. The third tip, and again, we've sort of already moved into it. The third tip is called setting the standard. So the first one was communicating what you truly desire, being aware of that. Number two is slowing it down. And the third one is setting the standard. So setting the standard is essentially when it's a little bit more like advanced, but when you do understand more about what you truly desire, just have a bit of a moment to go, what do I actually want in my intimate life? What are the relationships I'm seeking? When you actually know that, then you can set your own standard and say yes to experiences that are actually going to bring that in or are more likely to bring that in. So, for example, if I know that what I am seeking, I'm just going to use a really dramatic example. Let's say I want to meet somebody and I want to fall in love with them and I want to be in a committed relationship with them. Let's say that's where the person's at, right? If somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, looking for NSA like tonight," with a blank profile picture, and you get the vibe, you chat to them for a moment, you get the vibe, you're like, "Oh, this probably isn't it," but then they send you like a super sexy D pic and you're like, "Oh, maybe." Like
I could love that.
I could love that. Maybe there's something in there,
At
like,
least for 20 minutes.
right? If that, that obviously is going against
Yeah.
what you're truly seeking. So why are you
Yeah.
saying yes to that? And if you do say yes to that, know what you're saying yes to, and know, like, don't try and make it more than what it is, right? But ultimately, because I'm a spiritual coach too, like, if you're saying yes and yes and yes to the things that you know aren't actually going to meet you where you want to be met, you're saying no to welcoming in the person or the
Yeah.
people that will. So you're better off, in my opinion, you're better off to say no to those sort of invitations so that you can say yes to the guy that's like, "Hey, I really like your profile. Do you want to go and grab a drink and see where things go?" Because that's got more of the potential to move into what you
Yeah.
desire. But you have to be that person that sets the standard for yourself and for your
I,
dreams.
yeah. I feel like life, sort of like in business, the way they say time is money. How much time you invest in something is every bit as important as how much money you invest, capital you invest. And I feel like life is like that. Like, where are you investing your time? If every minute was a dollar, where are you spending those dollars? And if you're spending them on people who don't want to nourish you, feed your soul, and meet you where you're at, and create intimacy or whatever it is you're looking for, then it's sort of like eating donuts all day and saying, "I don't know why I'm gaining weight."
Yeah. And you're right, it's challenging in that the donuts are always going to be more titillating. The donuts are always going to be like more, I don't know, like intriguing or like better, more, like we want donuts. We don't want to eat celery or whatever the thing is. But we all know that if we just sat there eating donuts, we'd be unfulfilled, unhappy, and sick. So there is that, like, that slowdown, that second step is required, because if we don't slow it down and we just go at that sort of impulsive layer, you're always going to get more of the same. You're just going to keep
Yeah.
getting more of the same because you're not tuning into the higher you. You're not tuning into the deeper you. You're just moving from that impulsive layer.
Um. Now you're in Australia, um, and that's great for other gay men who are in Australia. Not so great for someone like in the United States or in Europe or somewhere else in the world that might want to work with you. And so I'm wondering if you could say just a little bit about your work. I know you do in-person stuff where you live, but maybe you could speak a little bit about your online offerings and the types of things, the ways people might be able to connect with you without
Yeah.
getting on an airplane?
Yeah, sure.
Or
I mean,
maybe they do. Maybe somebody is booking a ticket right now to fly to Australia for that marriage proposal. Just saying.
I'm
Putting
here,
it
I'm
out there
ready.
to the universe.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone does want to fly to Australia and come and do one of my tantric retreats, please do. You could make it a really amazing holiday. And they're
Mm.
pretty much in paradise. So I do tantric retreats. I do men's nude yoga here. So yes, all that in-person stuff does take place. I'm actually running a workshop next week. Um, Online, there's like two main things. Oh, maybe three main things. If you just want to get, dip your toe in, then I have a tantric download. It's a nude yoga tantric class. You can do it in your own time. That's really easy. You can just access it from my website. It's pretty cheap too. Um, if you're actually seeking something like a little bit more than that, you could consider joining the House of Tantra. So it's an online group men's uh, experience group community. We talk about Tantra, we do tantric work, we do like 4 to 6 workshops every single month. They're all online. I co-facilitate with that with a guy called Wolf, who owns Male Multiple Orgasm Australia. So he's a beautiful man. Um, you'd want to check your time zones and stuff. It's across the world. So that's the group stuff. But then if you wanted to do it one-on-one, I do one-on-ones online all the time. Like I said, I work with a guy in Los Angeles. I've worked with a guy in San Francisco, Colorado, like all over the place, South Africa, like not just the US.
Do
So
you ever go on the road? I mean, like, do you ever come to the United States or to Europe?
I haven't been internationally for my work, but I have been interstate in Australia for my work,
Yeah.
including Tasmania, which is that tiny island down the bottom. So maybe that's international.
Well, I'm just saying you have an invite to come to San Francisco, to the Bay Area. We would love you up here.
Yeah, we should run something
Just saying.
together up there. We can maybe run a little joint class or something.
We could have so much fun. And there's so many wonderful, beautiful souls up here that would love to work with you.
Mm.
But I'm sure they'll want to check out your online nude tantra class. I may check that out myself. Um, is there anything else you wanted to add to this conversation? I want to put this out there. Like, I feel like we've scratched the surface of some of your insights and wisdom, and I would love to have you come back on and maybe talk about a different topic, or if you're watching and there's topics you'd like to cover, drop them in the comments or something, and we'll do our best. But is there anything to wrap this episode up that we missed or that you want to add to before
Yeah,
we start to wrap?
thank you. Yeah, what came to me was like if we were to just sum up the entire conversation we've just had, I think it's this: trust your heart. Trust your heart. It's going to lead you in the right place.
Well said. Um, so, Andreas Anthony, your website is andreasembodiment.com. You're also on social media. And are you on YouTube as well? I think so. Am I
Yeah,
remembering that
although
correctly?
all my YouTube stuff is all my psychic work, so it's completely different
Ah,
things. But yes, I'm on
yeah.
everything.
If I were psychic, I would have known that. um, if you'd like to share this episode with somebody you know that might benefit from it, that would be awesome. If you want to see other episodes, I talked to a lot of really amazing healers and inspirational people who work with gay men. Check out some of the other episodes, or better yet, subscribe. And as I said earlier, we do have a Facebook group, and we're going to, at some point, do some live events. I'm sort of working on that. So if you want to be in the know on that, definitely connect with me. And I do coaching, teach yoga, and do body work here in the Bay Area. So if you're in the neighborhood, come take a class or check out one of my online classes as well. Andreas, you're awesome. I love chatting with you because we're both on the same page, but I think even when we do this stuff for a living, and you think about it and do it all day and you talk to people about it all day, I still need to be reminded myself because it can be easy to fall into that pit. And so I really appreciate the work you're doing, and it's been amazing. It's interesting scheduling conversations when you're in Australia. I'm like, no, I'm going to interview on Tuesday, but it's your Wednesday, and it makes my head hurt.
Me too, yes.
But I think we got it figured out. So thank you so much, and we will see you all in the next episode.